the reason they survived, like I said, is because of the small villages. But in the same time, they were also basically very greatly isolated from the rest of the Jewish world. That's the reason Alsatian Yiddish or expressions are not Yiddish. We don't speak Yiddish, which makes it a lot of times incomprehensible to Eastern Jews. How come you don't speak Yiddish?
Can you say some things to us in Alsatian Yiddish?
Well, we say, the ehrlich bekan, sag nichts, der ehrlich bekan. Say nothing, the Gentile is here. Bekan is here. Dovlemon and Chadishimona. One is Protestant, Dovlemon is Catholic, Dovlemon is Protestant, Chadishimon is Catholic. The Gala means the curé, the priest. Rishis means anti-Semitism. Also Manashuma. You don't say so, It comes from, most of that is bad Hebrew. It's Hebrew, it's just like the French in South Louisiana. The real old-timers. Now it's changed, but when I first started traveling that country in the early 50s, you still had a lot of old-time Cajuns there, the grandma and grandpa, that didn't speak 10 words of English in those little towns. And they couldn't read French. They couldn't write French. A language that's handed down vocally changes. And the Alsatian Yiddish, if you want to call it so, is nothing but very bad. Most of it has its roots in the Hebrew language. So therefore it's a mispronunciation of Hebrew, a bastardization of the language itself. But it's isolated from the rest of them, so therefore they developed their own culture. Like for instance, the people were still very charitable. The Alsatians are very charitable people. We were asking about on Saturdays, after shul and after dinner, it was a ritual. When I was a very small child, I hated it at the beginning. My mother would go and visit the sick, the poor, the shut-in, and we would stop at the pastry shop, and mother had ordered an order. We would pay for it once a month, and I would pick up all those little packages with cookies and eclair or whatever they like. When I would go with my mother, we would visit those recluse, men or women, old people or poor people, and we would bring him that. And soon I realized the pleasure that we brought to that particular person by doing the tzedakah of Saturday. And then after a while, I really enjoyed doing it. Where at the beginning I thought it was really a call to do so, like all children. But some of the people had little pieces of chocolates, and they would give me one or two of those little chocolates wrapped in wrappers, and of course that made a lot of difference.
Tell me the story about the Gisef in the family.
Well, the Gisef is the ritual of washing the hands. When you wash your hands in the morning with that. As you know, cleanliness is part of Judaism. Even today when the scribe writes the Torah, when Adonai comes in, he washes symbolically his hands much. Where the Christians were not so clean, the Jewish family had to be clean. So therefore, when they went up in the morning, in those days there was no running water. You had to go out to the well to get the water. The gisef is a two-piece copper vessel. One holds the water with a spigot, and the other one is the base of it. So in the morning when you would get up, you would wash your hands, say your prayers, bless God that you made me clean, and wash your face, and then you could put hot water in there, or you could leave cold water in there. But you didn't have to wait once a week or twice a month to take a bath, because water was there. And it also served as when a stranger came, wanted to wash his hands. And of course, you would wash your hands before to welcome the Sabbath, before you light the candles. So therefore, this particular it's known as it's not known anywhere else in the world by that name as Gisef. I know when my ancestor went to war with Napoleon's army to go to Moscow. I mean, the Napoleonic War. He walked all the way to Moscow and back. He washed his hands in there, and the first thing he did when he came back, he washed his hands in it. And you're talking about the item is from the Middle Ages. It's all done by hand, there's no nails or anything in there whatsoever. It's copper. During the War of 1870, it was buried. And when World War II started in 1939, my father buried it. And it's been buried many times before that. And after the war, when I came back from Auschwitz and Dachau, and I didn't want to do it at the beginning, because, but within a year, I unearthed it and brought it to my cousin, and they shipped it to me over here. So it's a very old relic. It's more than a piece of copper or utensils. I mean, it's the history of my family is in there for the last 600 years, 500 years. And this is something that I'm very proud to have it, because especially during the Holocaust and everything else, there's very few people have a memento that they can go back to that many generations to one item. And outside of the children and my mother, I don't think there was nothing more precious to my father than the Giza, because he connected with that. He knew its importance. He realized its importance.
Can you tell me your name and today's date and where we are?
I am B. Gotthelf, B. Lehman Gotthelf, and it's March 25th, 1998, and I'm in Jackson, Mississippi.
Can you tell me a little bit about the first family member who came to America from Alsace?
The first and only family member that I know of that came here were my grandfather and grandmother on my father's side. That was Aaron Lehman and Celestine Wolf Lehman, and they came to Jackson. I'm not sure of the date, but in the 1800s.
Do we know where in Alsace they were from?
Is there a Nuala? I don't know. It may be Nuala, Alsace, Lorraine.
Do we know why they came? Was there anyone here?
There were friends here, and as many who immigrated around that time, they came where they either had friends or family, and that's why they came.
What did they do when they got here?
When they came to Jackson, my grandfather opened a store. I guess it was a general store, and he and his wife and the family lived above the store, which was on South Congress Street.
What kind of store was it?
Just general merchandise, as I understand it.
How long was the store in operation?
I don't really know how long they were there. I just have no idea. I didn't get all of this from my family, and I should have.
Do you recall your grandparents?
Vaguely. I really only recall them from pictures, snapshots.
They passed away before you were born?
I believe they did.
Okay. So you were never in their home?
No, I was not. I
Okay.
was the youngest, and so by the time I came along, they had already passed away.
Were there stories passed down about them, though, that you recall? Any anecdotes or vignettes about their life?
No, not really. What I do know is that they taught my older two sisters the Marseillaise, so they, when they were quite young, could sing it in French, and did. And I do know that my grandmother wore a little white cap on her head, and other than that, I don't really know much about them. I do know that my grandfather was hard of hearing, and he was hit by a train when my mother and father were on their honeymoon, and he was killed that way.
Your father is of how many siblings?
My father had 3 sisters and a brother.
And where does he fit into the...
My father was there were 2, I guess he was in the middle. He was about the second from the youngest.
Do you remember when he was born? His date of birth?
Date, December the 13th.
Of what year? Do you
Mark,
remember?
I don't know these dates
It's
too
okay.
well.
It's okay.
I don't know.
This would be, though, sometime in the...
My father would be at least 100.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
about to say late
Right.
1890s, maybe something like that. That's
Right.
fine, just to give us a
Sure.
ballpark figure. That's fine. And can we talk a little bit about your dad? Things that, his schooling, you would...
My father stopped school when he was about 10 or 11, I believe, because the family needed some extra income. So he got a little wagon and started going around collecting. In those days, men wore what they called celluloid collars, and there was not a place in Jackson to have them cleaned or washed. So my father would collect those and take them to the Illinois Central Railroad, put them on a train, send them to Memphis. They would send them back all cleaned, and my father would deliver them. And so he didn't really have much of an education, although he did very well without it.
How did that job with the celluloid collars progress for him as a business?
It progressed very well. A man in the congregation gave him a horse and buggy when those days came into being, and so he started collecting more than just collars. He would collect laundry and send it to Memphis. And then eventually my father and another man started the Jackson Steam Laundry, which was on South State Street. And when the other partner died, my father owned the whole business. So it was our livelihood for quite a while. At one point, they were doing laundry and cleaning. At one point, they had a contest to see what to name the cleaning business, and someone suggested Laymanized Dry Cleaning, which was our name. So that's what it went by.
Did you ever work in the
No, I
store?
didn't, but my oldest sister did. When she got out of college, she worked in the bookkeeping for a while.
And how did the store close recently? Or?
Oh, no, it's been, I guess, I would think maybe 15 years ago, 20 years, somewhere around there.
And do you know approximately when it started, in terms of a decade, when the store might have?
It was I would think in the 1800s also, but I really don't know.
So it may have been around then for upwards of 60
Yeah,
years?
oh, yes.
60,
Yeah,
70 years
yeah.
maybe?
Mm-hmm. It was really started out as the Jackson Steam Laundry and Bath Company, and people used to go there to take baths. That was its first name. Mm-hmm.
Do you have recollections of being around the store at all, even if you weren't working there?
The laundry?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. In fact, on Saturdays, a little boyfriend and I, or a girlfriend, would go to a movie. You know, they had serials, and we had to go every Saturday. And all I had to do when we got out of the movie was to call the laundry, and one of the drivers would come in a truck and pick us up and take us home. And I remember that vividly, and we would have Thanksgiving parties for everyone that worked for and in the laundry. And it was more like a family than employer-employee.
When you were growing up in your parents' home. How were holidays celebrated? Can you tell me about your own Jewish education and both regular holidays, Jewish holidays?
Well, when I was quite, I think I was just a few months old when we moved to Gillespie Street, which is in the Belhaven area. And we had a wonderful time there, and whenever we would celebrate anything, especially Passover, we had quite a large family. And then from that house, my parents and my sister and her husband built a home on Old Canton Road. And by that time, my sisters had married and had children, so the group around the table increased quite a bit, and we always had strangers who might be in town. And it was just a wonderful thing to look back on, but when it was happening, it was even more wonderful. And we got together quite often. We were a very close family. And I don't know what else. We had Sunday school picnics in our backyard on Old Canton Road, barbecues, and everybody would come, and it was just a great time for the whole Jewish community to be together.
Do you remember some of the foods that your family served? What might be a Passover meal or a Friday night meal? What might be on the table?
Well, my mother was a really good cook, and unfortunately I didn't take after her, but we would have the traditional foods, you know, matzo ball soup with matzo balls that were delicious, and probably chicken or some brisket or something like that, and noodle kugel, just the same things that I guess we have today. And then we'd have some delicious kind of dessert. Of course, the one I remember vividly, it was like made out of egg whites with strawberries on it, and it was wonderful.
Do you recall in the family Alsatian dishes or anything Alsatian that was passed
The
down?
only thing I can recall, and I think this might have been Alsatian, was a dish that my aunts made that was when lettuce would first come in. They would take lettuce and English peas, and I think they sautéed them together. I think that may have been a French dish. It was quite good.
You had talked about, I guess this was in your grandparents' generation, them teaching the Marseille to their children. Did the French language or anything else about Alsace get passed down in the family?
Not anything that I know of. I cannot think of anything Alsatian that came down from I'm sure there were some, but all of the ones that would remember are gone, so I can't tell you much about them.
Yeah. How about the Jackson Jewish community? Where did you go to? Where was the temple when you were a
When I
child?
was really young, the temple was on South State Street, and it was naturally a very small Jewish community, but we all went, and we had religious school there, and usually on Friday nights after temple we'd go visit one of the older relatives or friends, and of course I'd have to go, not that I really wanted to, but like all children we had to do those things in those days.
Did you go to Sunday school on South State Street?
Yes, I went to religious school there, and I guess I was confirmed. Yes, I was confirmed there.
And then the temple moved.
Then the temple moved to Woodrow Wilson, and that's where my children were educated in Judaism.
What do you recall about the Woodrow Wilson or the one on South State? Could you describe either building?
Well,
from
the
your
one
memory?
on South State, I remember that we had a choir that consisted of, I think, 2 people, and then my aunt, who had a fairly good voice. I wouldn't say it was excellent, but she was in the choir, and then the children were in it. I was in the choir for years, and I remember that, and they would sit right up in front, and everybody had their certain place to sit. It was just You just knew that that was your pew, and they sat there. We had Purim carnivals at the Elks Club, which is on President Street, was on President Street, and people, adults and children, would dress up and have a wonderful time. And it was just a really close-knit congregation because there were so few of us.
How was it that what caused the need for the temple to
The
move?
population was moving north, and South State Street was becoming more commercialized, and it was time to make a new beginning in another building.
Was the Woodrow Wilson building larger or
Yes,
different?
yes, it was larger and it was different in construction. Also, it was a brick building, and as I remember the one on South State Street, I'm not sure that it was. I'm not really sure.
Do you remember the inside? Were there stained glass windows? Do you remember anything about the Woodrow Wilson?
Well, it was very light. The sanctuary, we had windows so that during the holidays when you pray on Yom Kippur till sundown, you knew when sundown was as opposed to what we have right now. But the choir sat in a choir loft and was not seen, and it was above the bema, and it was nothing like the synagogue we have now, but it was adequate. We entertained soldiers there all during the war. The women would cook a meal, usually on Saturday or Sunday, and invite all of the soldiers who were stationed here at the airfield or in Hattiesburg. They'd come in from all over, and they would have that and some kind of entertainment for them, because in those days we didn't have picture shows, so there was nothing for a serviceman to do on Sunday.
And then the temple moved again.
Then it moved again to the old Canton Road where we are now.
What was the reason for that last move?
Well, you know, I'm not really sure. I think, though, it was the same thing, that we felt like we needed to get more north where people were moving. And I think that was the real reason for making the change.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the Jewish community and the wider Christian community in Jackson?
Well, when I was growing up, when I was in high school, well, all the way from first grade on, there were, of course, very few Jewish children. And no one ever asked me about my religion. They knew perfectly well that I was Jewish, but it never seemed to come up in conversation. And I would, all the way through high school, I would think that it was that way. Until in high school, they started sororities, and then I realized that I wasn't looked on as well as Christian girls were, because I wasn't invited to join that sorority, but all of the people that I went with were. So I guess that was my first realization that things weren't as I thought they were.
Was there a parallel Jewish social organization?
No.
Where would you have gone then to meet young Jewish people?
Just to the temple. We didn't have youth group in my day, and you know, people did. You would see people from the Delta sometimes, but I never really knew any Jewish young people when I was growing up that were from around here. I didn't know any in Vicksburg or any of the Delta towns like kids do now. Of course, Jacob's Camp helps that so much, and youth group, that they go to conclaves. But there weren't any. There wasn't that kind of thing going on in my day. Every Sunday, the family would get in the car, and of course we didn't have air conditioning, but just having the wind blow in the summertime was a help. So we would all go to the cemetery every Sunday and take flowers and put them on the graves of those who had passed away. And that was a ritual, and it really was quite far out of town because in those days we lived so much closer in. And it was, my family at one time lived on South State Street, as did most Jews then.
Why do you think the family did that every Sunday?
It was just something that I guess was handed down from generations. I don't know. But we did it every Sunday, went to the cemetery.